Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako.
Welcome. Today we're diving into a really fascinating period in Japanese history, the Nara period.
That's right. It kicks off with the big move of the capital to Heijō, that's modern-day Nara.
And it lasts, what, over 80 years? A time of huge change, setting up a more structured state.
Exactly. We're going to explore some of the key things that happened, the big developments.
Think of this as your guide to what really mattered back then.
Yeah, from building a whole new capital city to, trying to organize the entire country, both its borders and how it was run.
So let's start with that capital move, 710, right? Empress Genmai moves the court from Fujiwara to Heijō. Why the change?
Well, it wasn't just a whim. It was really about reflecting this growing system, the Ritsuri state.
Ah, the big legal and administrative code based on Chinese models.
Precisely. They needed a capital that fit that more centralized, organized structure. In Heijō, its location was just better.
Better how? Like, practically speaking.
Yeah, practically. Think water access, land routes. Much better for transport and communication, which you absolutely need if you're managing a bigger area.
Okay, so that move really marks the start of the Nara period proper.
It really does. It signals a commitment to this new way of running the country.
And it wasn't just about the capital city, was it? They were actively pushing outwards, too.
Oh, definitely. There was a clear push to expand the government's reach. Up in the northeast, early 8th century, they carved out Mutsu and Dewa provinces from what used to be part of Echigo.
So new administrative regions.
Right, and to make it stick, they built defenses like the Dewa Barrier and later Taga Barrier, which became Taga Castle. Important spots, militarily and administratively.
Holding the new territory. What about down south?
Similar story. They split off Sumi province from Hyuga and even brought islands like Tanegashima into the fold.
And the goal behind this expansion?
Largely, it was about governing the people already there, the Emishi in the north and the Hayato down south, bringing them under central authority.
Right, extending the Ritsuri state's control. Okay, so geographically expanding. What about the economy? Were they trying to boost things beyond just rice farming?
Yes, very much so. The government actually told local officials, the Kokushi and Gunji, to encourage more diverse farming.
Like what?
Things like millet, wheat, beans, planting them in dry fields, not just focusing only on rice paddies, probably aiming for a more stable food supply.
Makes sense. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, agriculturally speaking.
Exactly. And alongside that, a big push to exploit mineral resources.
Oh yeah, like what were they finding?
Well, gold up in Mutsu, copper down in Sushi and Nagato, iron in places like Umi, Mimasaka.
And didn't a copper discovery lead to something pretty big, symbolically?
Ah, yes. The copper found in Musashi province in 708, that was considered so important, so auspicious, they actually changed the era name to Wadu.
Wadu, meaning Japanese copper.
That's the one.
Dang.
And that discovery directly led to minting the Wajushkaichin coin.
Japan's first official copper currency. A huge step.
It really was a tangible symbol of this developing economy.
But how well did it catch on? Did people actually start using these coins everywhere?
Well, the government definitely tried. They even issued this order, the Chikuzenjoi Rei.
What was that about?
It was meant to encourage people to accumulate wealth, offering ranks, probably tied to using these new coins, trying to get them circulating.
Did it work?
It was a slow process. Out in the countryside, people still relied heavily on the old ways, bartering with rice, using cloth as currency. You can't just flip a switch on something like that.
True. Old habits die hard, especially with something as fundamental as money. So with this bigger administration, more economic activity, how do they connect everyone? Communication, travel?
Roads. They developed a network of roads spreading out from Heijō, and crucially, they set up the ekisei.
The ekisei, that was like a postal system.
Sort of, yeah. A relay system. They had post stations, umaya, set up about every 16 kilometers along the main routes.
For whom, mainly?
Primarily for government officials, traveling back and forth between the capital and the provinces. It helps speed up communication, delivery of orders, that kind of thing.
The logistical backbone of the state, really.
You could say that. Absolutely vital.
Now, going back to the coins for a second. The Wadikaichin was the first official copper coin. But wasn't there something even earlier?
Ah, you're thinking of the Fuhansen. Yes, that's a fascinating discovery.
Tell me about that.
In 1998, archaeologists found fragments of these Fuhansen coins in the Asukaike ruins near Nara.
And the key thing was the dating.
Right, exactly. The layer they were found in dates to the late 7th century. That's well before the Water-Kaichin were minted in 708.
So coin making was happening earlier than we used to think.
It seems so. There's even a line in the Nihon Shoki, the chronicles, from 683 Emperor Tenmu's time.
What does it say?
It says something like, from now on, copper coins must be used. And many scholars think that refers to the Fu Hansen.
Wow. So the idea was already there. What about the name Futhon? Any idea what that means?
It's possibly linked to this idea that national wealth comes from food and goods. It's a concept that pops up again later, actually. Shows an early grasp of, the utility of currency.
Early experiments in economic tools.
That's the thing.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Another huge part of the Nara period, the missions to Tang China, the Kentushi.
Hugely important, yes. They restarted in 702 after a long break, like over 30 years.
Oh, the break.
That was after the defeat at the Battle of Bait Gang. Relations were probably too tense, but by the 8th century, things between Japan and Tang China were more stable.
And these missions became a major pipeline for culture.
Oh, absolutely. A primary way Japan imported Chinese culture, learning, technology, you name it.
Were these small trips?
No, often massive, sometimes over 500 people, usually traveling on 4 ships.
4 ships? That's quite an undertaking. Must have been risky.
Extremely risky. The sea crossing was dangerous. Envoys, monks, they faced real peril, but the payoff was huge.
What were they bringing back?
Texts, lots and lots of texts, especially Buddhist scriptures, but also ideas about art, architecture, philosophy, government. It had a profound impact on Japan.
A major investment in learning from the continent, despite the dangers. Now, Japan wasn't just looking outwards. People were coming in too, right, from Korea.
That's right. After Baekje and Goguryeo fell in the 7th century, quite a few refugees came to Japan and were naturalized.
What kind of people?
A mix. Some were former royals or aristocrats who actually got involved in Japanese politics in the 8th century, but many were farmers who often settled out in the eastern provinces and really contributed to developing those areas.
So integrating newcomers. What about Silla, their closer neighbor on the peninsula? How were relations there?
More complicated, often tense.
Why was that?
Well, there were plenty of envoys going back and forth, but there was friction over status. Silla wanted to be treated as an equal. Japan, however, kind of wanted to position Silla as more of a tributary state.
Ah, a diplomatic sticking point.
Exactly. That difference in viewpoint caused problems, sometimes even small clashes.
So not always smooth sailing. Any other neighbors they were dealing with?
Yes, the kingdom of Balhae, it emerged up in northeastern China, kind of opposing both Tang and Silla.
And Japan's relationship with them?
Balhae sent tribute missions to Japan. They brought things like furs from the north, so another layer to Japan's foreign relations in East Asia.
Right, navigating a complex regional web. Let's circle back to those Kentushi missions to China. You said they were perilous. Can you give us more of a sense of the hardship?
Well, these missions ran from the 7th century right into the 9th, and they were just fundamental for Japanese culture. But the journey itself, brutal.
How so?
For one thing, food. The main staple was dried rice, canpan. Not exactly nutritious. Malnutrition was probably common.
Not a luxury cruise, then.
Definitely not. And the route itself, from the early 8th century, they mainly used the southern route straight across the East China Sea.
Sounds direct but dangerous.
Very. They didn't have a great understanding of seasonal winds, and the ships themselves weren't the sturdiest. Shipwrecks were frequent, a real gamble.
Any famous examples of things going wrong?
The story of Abe no Nakamaro is probably the most famous. He went to Tang China, did really well there, served in the court for years. But when he tried to return to Japan in 753, his ship got separated, blown completely off course.
Where did he end up?
Annam, modern-day Vietnam, miles and miles away.
Wow. Did he ever get back?
He eventually made it back to Chang'an, the Tang capital, but he never managed to return to Japan. Died in China.
How tragic.
It is. And he wrote this famous poem, A Waka, expressing his homesickness, looking at the moon and thinking of Nara. Really brings home the human cost of these exchanges.
A powerful story. Okay, let's shift back to politics inside Japan. Early 8th century. Things are changing, power is shifting. the Fujiwara clan starts its rise.
Yes, this is crucial. The old balance between the imperial family and various aristocratic clans starts to wobble. Fujiwara no Fuhiro is the key figure initially.
What was his strategy?
He was smart. He worked to strengthen the Ritsuri system, which gave the central government more power, but also cleverly used marriage politics.
Marrying Fujiwara daughters into the imperial family.
Exactly. It built incredibly strong ties and boosted his and his clan's influence enormously.
But it wasn't a smooth ride to the top, was it? I remember reading about the Nagaya conspiracy.
Right. After Fuhito died, his main rival was Nagaya, a powerful imperial prince. He represented the non-Fujiwara faction, trying to push back. Well, Fuhito's four sons basically schemed against him, accused him of plotting rebellion, and forced him to commit suicide, a pretty ruthless move.
Definitely sounds like it. That must have really cemented Fujiwara power.
It did, especially when Fuhito's daughter, Kushi, became Empress Kumyu, the wife of Emperor Shumu. But then, plot twist, those four Fujiwara sons, they all died relatively young from epidemics. Smallpox, likely.
So a power vacuum.
Sort of. Power then shifted back towards the imperial family, specifically to Tachibana no Muro.
And that didn't sit well with everyone.
No. It led to the Fujiwara no Hiratsugu rebellion. He was a Fujiwara official down in Kyushu who rose up against Muro's government.
Was it successful?
No, it was put down. But it shows just how unstable things were. Lots of political maneuvering and faction fighting.
Turbulent times. Amid all this, were there efforts to address underlying problems, like, say, land shortages?
Yes, definitely. Back when Nagaya was influential, around 722, this big plan was proposed, the Million Chubu Cultivation Plan, aimed at opening up vast new areas for farming.
1,000,000 chubu. That's a lot of land.
Huge ambition. And the next year, 723, they passed a law called the Sanzei Ishin no Hu.
The 3 generations law.
Right. It basically said if you developed new land with new irrigation, you, your child, and your grandchild could own it privately. If you used old irrigation, only you could own it for your lifetime.
So an incentive to invest in developing new farmland.
Exactly. But then, under Tachibana no Muro in 743, came an even bigger change, the Kondenshu no Shizaihu.
Okay, what did that do?
This law allowed permanent private ownership of newly cultivated land, a major shift.
Permanent ownership. That sounds like it could really change the whole land system.
Well, that's been the traditional view, that this law was the start of the end for the public land system of the Ritsuri state and the beginning of private estates, the shun, that dominate the Heian period.
But there's another interpretation.
Yes, more recently, some historians argue it was maybe less about dismantling the old system and more about clarifying rules for new land, trying to protect the rights of people actually doing the hard work of development.
Interesting distinction. Either way, it probably encouraged big players to develop land, right?
Oh, absolutely. Nobles, powerful temples. They partnered with local bigwigs, the Gunji, promoted land development, even bought up land from poorer peasants. This definitely fueled the growth of early shun.
These private estates managed by the powerful.
Usually centered around the lord's villa or maybe a central storehouse, yeah.
What about the ordinary farmers in all this? How are they faring?
It was tough for many. Between natural disasters, droughts, floods, epidemics, and the tax burden, staying afloat on their allocated plots, Kubundan, was hard.
So some just couldn't make it.
Sadly, yes. Some had to abandon their land, their homes even. They became wanderers, runaways, trying to survive somehow.
A widening gap between the wealthy landowners and struggling peasants. And that political instability we talked about, the Hiratsugu rebellion, that had real consequences too.
It did. Emperor Shumu actually left the capital, Heijō, during the rebellion, and even afterwards, the court moved around quite a bit.
Where'd they go?
To Kuni, then Naniwa, then Shigaraki, all in fairly quick succession. Imagine the disruption that caused. Social unrest was high.
Constant moving, political fighting, very unsettled. And Emperor Shumu tried to use Buddhism to calm things down.
Yes, famously. He seemed to believe that invoking Buddhist power could bring stability. In 741, he ordered the building of Kokubunji provincial temples in every province.
A temple in every province, that's ambitious.
It was. And then, in 743, he commissioned the Great Buddha statue, the huge bronze Roshana Butsu for Tsurugi Temple.
The Daibutsu in Nara, still awe-inspiring today.
Exactly. The project actually started in Shigaraki, but was moved back to Hajikyu, to Tsudaiji. The eye-opening ceremony, the Kaigen Puyu, wasn't held until about 10 years later, a massive religious and political statement.
Did it work? Did it quell the instability?
Not entirely. The political power struggles continued. Figures like Fujiwara no Nakamaro and the monk Dukyu became central players.
Right, tell us about that phase. Nakamaro takes charge.
After Tachibana no Moro died, Nakamaro, who was Furuhito's grandson, pushed through the Yurt Code, his grandfather's legal reforms. He got rid of rivals like Tachibana no Naramaro.
Consolidated power.
He did. Emperor Junin even gave him a new name, Emi no Oshikatsu. He was really running the show. But then came Duki,
the Buddhist monk. How did he get so powerful?
He gained the trust of the retired Empress Kukin by apparently nursing her back to health during an illness.
Proximity to power.
And influence. Nakamaro saw him as a threat, tried to eliminate him, but failed. Nakamaro ended up being defeated and killed himself.
So Duki's rises.
Dramatically. Empress Kukin actually reascended the throne as Empress Shitoku. And Dukyush from the Yuge clan reached this unprecedented position, Hush, Dharma King. He was hugely influential, implementing Buddhist-inspired policies.
A monk essentially running the government.
It was extraordinary. There was even a bizarre episode where an attempt was made to put him on the imperial throne itself.
Seriously? Based on what?
Supposedly an oracle from the Yusa Hachimangu shrine down in Kyushu.
Did it happen?
No. Key figures, notably Fujiwara no Momokawa and Wake no Kiyomaro, intervened and exposed the oracle as questionable, thwarting the attempt.
Wow. What happened to Juchi's in the end?
After Empress Shitoku died, the establishment moved quickly. A new emperor, Kunin, who was descended from Emperor Tenji, took the throne. Jukyu was stripped of his power and exiled to Shimotsuke province. End of an era, really.
What a roller coaster. The Nara period seems packed with just so much change.
It really was. You look at the ambition, a new capital, expanding borders, trying out currency, these massive Buddhist projects. It's foundational stuff.
Yeah, you can see the shape of later Japan starting to form. And those Kentushi missions, the risks they took.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it? That willingness to face danger, to bring back knowledge, ideas, culture from Tang China. It wasn't just politics driving things.
It was about absorbing influences, learning, shaping what it meant to be Japanese at that time.
And it does make you wonder about the everyday people caught up in all this, right? Life in HQ, or for those farmers trying new crops while the rules about land kept changing.
Exactly. There are so many layers beneath the big historical events. The personal stories.
For sure. We've really just scratched the surface here today, but hopefully it gives you a sense of just how pivotal the Nara period was.
Definitely food for thought.
Yeah.
It really encourages you to think about how these early choices, these struggles and innovations set the stage for everything that followed. What part of Nara society do you find the most intriguing to explore further?